All right, take two. First rule of this channel: we not talk about the channel. Second rule of this channel: that's not legal advice. So, was trying to get done the running back positional breakdown video. I don't know if I'm going to do any of those positional breakdowns. I'm just not necessarily feeling that. There are other guys out there I think do better than me. So, in this case, did get done yesterday what I need to get done today. So I was sitting around like clicking on some fantasy football news, and all of a sudden I had like a whole bunch of news and notes on a whole bunch of teams, and I said, like I might as well just get a video done while I am feeling productive in this case. So first thing to talk about is projected good offenses versus cheap bad offenses. That's like generally the way I would look at it from a fantasy perspective. Is good offenses are going to be more expensive, and from a ranking standpoint, we generally do not see hot takes built into rankings. What we see is this consensus, and I don't want the same outcome as everybody else in my league. I want to win my league. So, from the standpoint of bad offenses, if I think an offense is going to be good, then they're probably generally undervalued. And if I think an offense is going to be bad, but they are cheap enough, then it doesn't matter what I think. I'm just going to go after the price, right? So, a wide receiver two on a bad offense is still going to have value because he is going to be like a top 24 guy. It doesn't matter if he's going like at like 130. I don't care. How good the offense is on paper, because it's not a real football channel. It's a fantasy football. So that's how I generally look at some of that stuff. O-line rankings, I don't really care about. As a football coach, I generally look at the O-line as something that has to be greater than the sum of its parts. And we're not going to know a lot of that stuff because you're looking at coaching. That's just both the offensive coordinator and the offensive line coach. Nagging injuries that we generally won't know about because they're not going to tell you about some triceps tweak that a guy got like second day of camp and has been nursing that all season because he's going to gut it out because that's what offensive linemen do. And then all that stuff has to come together around the coaching staff that's trying to allow guys to do what they do well and not do what they do poorly. And then because offensive line has to have like that trust factor, we're just generally not going to know how good or bad an offensive line is until like halfway through the season, and everybody's like, "Oh, this is the PFF graded best offensive line." I don't care about that stuff. So unless we start hearing about a lot of injuries, like the Tristan Wirfs injury for the Buccaneers, they just generally like it's not the greatest predictor based off of rankings. It's all about price. Like a guy that is 150 overall can be my 13th round draft pick, and if I hit on the pick, I hit on the pick. If I miss on the pick, it costs me nothing, and that's generally how I look at stuff. So other things to talk about, like from a strategy perspective, and me and my co-manager in my main money league are really hammering out our strategy. Probably going to be fading the wide receiver twos out there, the 12 through 24 type of guys. Don't really think I can replace that someplace else in the draft. Looking at clustering of rankings, and can I replace that later on? Like if I think I can replace that production someplace else, I will. That allows me the flexibility to attack other positions instead of wide receiver twos. Legendary upside running backs, I'm going to be going after those guys that have roads to do that. Like that's just a good way to win your league. It's also a good way to lose your league on that one. Elite quarterback versus cost. I just don't generally know if there's going to be a Jaden Daniels this year, and trying to predict your Baker Mayfields are very difficult at that point. And then, I'm just going to be generally fading the tight end position. I talked about this already in the offseason. I think we're going to get a lot of two tight end sets by a lot of teams. And then, if we're getting, 800-900 yards from a second tight end, and because they're basically the de facto wide receiver three, there's going to be a lot of guys I can go after. And unless like some of the elite guys are actually like unicorns and they're competing with wide receivers, I can go a different direction. So I can look at my clustering of players, and you can see like right to visualize this. And again, like it's ESPN, like whatever, make your own rankings. I don't care. Just so you can visualize this. 26 is Tyreek Hill. I won't be touching him with your roster more than likely. And then Calvin Ridley, 55 overall on ESPN. I would be touching him with your roster. So it just allows me all those wide receivers that go in between that, like I'm probably not going to be interested in. And that means there are other guys that I can go after in that range, either at cost or going up on. And that's how I would generally attack it. You can kind of see where I think I can get a replacement for that production later on in your draft, where it's like Tet, McMillan, Stephon Diggs, Cedric Tillman, Josh Palmer going up in 13th round of the draft. If I get like a wide receiver 2 out of him, there's a Buka there at like 112. I would have to go up on to go after some of these guys. And Ricky Pearsall at 99, I would go up around on a Ricky Pearsall and try and get the same production that I would between Tyreek Hill and Zay Flowers, Courtland Sutton. If that makes sense. How I would run my strategy this year overall. Those running backs. Some of those running backs do appear to be slightly misvalued. Like I could see A-Chain being the 101. I could also see that McCaffrey could be the 101, and I could see that like Chase Brown could be the 101. Like those were the guys that I would be looking at with those like legendary outcome seasons. And again, like with your top 4-5 quarterbacks this year, going after them, because again, I just don't know if like JJ McCarthy or Drake May is going to be like 22 point a game guy. Or 20 point a game guy where they're going at in the draft. So like that's how I would see it. And then as you can see, there's going to be a lot of tight ends I can go after like way later in the draft. I'll get into some of those guys. Like as I was breaking down some of the news today about some of where the tight ends are functioning in their camps. Sometimes certain no news is the news that will tell you what's going on out there. One of the things I was listening to the bootleg guys talk about the Tennessee Titans. I'll bring this up. So last year and after waivers, I was talking about like how good statistically the Tennessee Titans are when it comes to yards per game. And then we have the aberration, like why stats lie. They are also doing 27 points per game getting scored on. So like low yards, high points, because like when you're that bad on offense and you're turning the football over, teams are not necessarily driving on you to put yards on, but they are scoring points. And then Brett Coleman over there, the bootleg guys, I do like them, even though I don't necessarily like their politics. In this case, like it explains why, because he was talking about like their offensive line and their defensive line were so bad, and that's kind of why you could understand like why all that stuff comes together to kind of explain where some of my mindset were. All right, so I'm moving on to my notes. I'm gonna start off with like 49ers, just go by team like I normally like to do in this case. So all news right now is Christian McCaffrey's all wheels up. He's healthy. Isaac Garriendo is going to be like, the number one lottery ticket when it comes to handcuffs this year. Let's see. They did bring in Jeff Wilson and Dearness Johnson today, I guess, to get looked at as insurance policies out there. I don't think this is a big deal overall. Again, this is like roster construction stuff. Like Juice is going to play special teams. Patrick Taylor is going to play special teams. It would make me think that the 49ers are probably not super comfortable if they get an injury to one of their top guys, Garriendo or what's his face, CMC. It probably makes me think that like they don't feel comfortable that like Jordan James is going to be that guy if they get an injury for him to end up being the backup. Now, the other thing that I would think about with this is they're going to bring certain guys in to be on the practice squad. And remember, like if it's a 90-man camp roster, I think it's like 69 guys with your practice squad guys at the end of the year will end up making the team. So there are certain guys that they want to bring in, like they are professionals. They will run that role when it comes to scout team stuff down the line. That's how I would look at like your Jeff Wilson and your Dearness Johnson when it comes down to that. And like arguing with my co-manager in my main money league when it comes to CMC, because he's always injured. And I was like, I don't care, because in the snob leagues, he's going at like in the second round, and I'll bring up this one on your Fantasy Pros. CMC's going like 11 or running back 11 overall, or overall 11. And in the snob leagues, I've been hearing that he's going in second round of draft, which you can contrast that with like Omarion Hampton is going in the second round of snob leagues also. So like the idea that like, yes, if you give me an opportunity to spend like a second round draft pick on a guy that could have like a league winning season, yeah, I will smash that every time, because I'm not in the business of coming in third place in my fantasy football league. I would rather come in last place because I took a shot at winning than coming in third place on a year-to-year basis so I could pat myself on the back, right? Like making playoffs in fantasy football is not difficult. Winning your league is, and there's like a certain amount of luck component to that. But there's other things that I can control, and I like to be able to control those things. So moving on from that, and I already talked a little bit about Slick Rick. So he is going to be the guy, probably going to be a league winner at the cost overall. The story behind that would be like, we don't know what's going to go on with Ayuk when he comes back. And then on top of that, like Juwan Jennings goes down with a calf. So like, yeah, we could definitely say like, yeah, we're gonna get somewhere between like a wide receiver 2 and a wide receiver 1 with Ricky Pearsall. Everything's in that direction, and it just becomes an issue of cost at that point. Like 99, you're probably gonna have to go up around in your Fantasy Pros leagues and in your or in your ESPN leagues and in your Fantasy Pros leagues. I think he's like actually lower, like 112, something like that. If I can find him someplace around here, there's Ayuk. 102. So you're probably gonna have to go up like 92 to go up and get him in your Fantasy Pros type of leagues. And I ain't the only guy talking about that. So like, he's the guy I like. If you want to go after Juwan Jennings, part of the conversation behind that would be like how sustainable his production will be once Ayuk comes back, if Ayuk is able to get up to health. Let's see. I want to look at some of the other stuff with the Bears. Looking at my notes with the Bears, a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing on Twitter is their offense is struggling. Do with that with what you will. We'll have the ongoing conversation is worst comes to worst, go after cheapest available when it comes to the guys. So like Rome and DJ Moore, I think are about the same price. There's Rome 64, and then DJ Moore is somewhere 49. So I go Rome if I want that. But the reality of it in this offense is I would probably go after your Corlin Loveland at like 125, because I think he's going to operate as the wide receiver 3, so he's probably going to be like 70% snaps. Like again, you're looking at something along the lines of Laporta 2 years ago, where he's doing like 800-900 yards receiving, and you're hoping to get like the splash on the touchdowns. That would be one of the offenses I would expect that, but they are still saying that the offense is very inconsistent in being able to project usage flops or overall consistency based off of that. Doesn't matter except for the tight end position. I would generally say, all right, Bengals. So the Bengals released Zach Moss yesterday. So like everything is in the realm of we're going to get like wheels up Chase Brown. I still generally think we're not going to get like legendary outcome Chase Brown. There may be like talent problems behind that. Samaje Perine will probably vulture a few touchdowns, but at the price that he's going, like this would be another one that like everybody's talking about, like 32 overall on ESPN. Going over at Fantasy Pros, I think he's like 27 or something like that, 24. So like, yeah, in your kind of your less competitive leagues, you probably still would have to go up on him and try to get him at cost. Anybody out there, like my auction league, one of the biggest things with my auction league is one guy can totally change the price of a guy versus the deal that I think I'm going to get on him. So same thing with your snake draft leagues. My high school league is less competitive because like half the league are like are guys that we have to kick to set lineups on Sunday mornings. But even in that league, like one guy can go up in a snake draft and consistently take some of the guys I think are good, and the other half, the other 6 guys, like this is their secondary league too. So there are a lot of guys that like know what they're doing in that league, and they will still go up around. And that we saw that last year in that league too. So like, be advised, if you like some of these guys, you're probably gonna have to go up on them. So when it comes to like your Chase Browns, like yeah, like 24, so like early second maybe is probably someplace that you'd have to be looking to pull the trigger on Chase Brown. And then that goes back to looking at the wide receiver 2 position. Go back to this one. And I do like some of these guys that are out there. I do like Ladd. I think T. Higgins. I do like those guys. But after that, those guys go off the board. Like I probably think I can get the production of some of those guys someplace else in the draft. And that at that point, like that's where I would be going up a little bit on like my elite quarterbacks, trying to get those guys at cost, or going up on some of the other like the running backs with those the elite level ranges of outcomes. Like it doesn't matter what I think about like Kenneth Walker or where's the other one? Kenneth Walker or Brees or something like that. Like those guys, we can talk about having roads to win leagues based off like receiving upside if they put it all together in a particular season. Let's see. The wide receiver 3 that does look like he's tearing up camp is Yossi, like Andre Yosivas. So like there is, if we're wondering about that, and if you're in deep enough leagues where wide receiver 3s attached to good offenses that are attached to bad defenses that could score a lot of points, like it does look like he's out there tearing things up for the second year in a row. Moving on to the Bills, I did see this as a pretty good argument, and I just relay it. So Khalil Shakur, he doesn't generally see the field outside of like 3 wide receiver sets, and you could see that from last year. His snap share is about like 60% 50 to 70%. He's not on 2 wide receiver sets. We'll talk about like Roman Wilson later on. So in this case, the 2 guys that are going to be on the field in 2 tight end sets are right now we're projecting to be like Keon Coleman. Say what you want about him, and Josh Palmer that they paid this year. Now, the conversation between these 2 guys is with Keon Coleman, you are going to be paying like 100 on ESPN prices, or Josh Palmer like 204. So like at that point, like 13th round draft pick Josh Palmer, and then in a lot of leagues, if you don't feel like you have to go up on a Josh Palmer, you can probably knife fight for him week 1. And I don't necessarily know if you're going to get like a league winner outside of like a wide receiver 2, or like maybe Dalton Kincaid as a top 10 tight end or something like that. But at the prices that you would pay on like that's probably inappropriately valued at that point, especially with if you're factoring in potential upside of being the number 1 attached to Josh Allen. There, let's see. And I don't have very much to say about the running back situation there. I haven't seen anything on that. So if I don't talk about something, it's because I didn't see anything to talk about when it comes to these guys, and I'm just not going to say stuff on the internet for the sake of doing it like some guys. So J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey are both, I guess, doing well in camp. So still tracking that we're going to get some type of like split between those 2 guys out there. And then the conversation about Evan Ingram, not a real tight end. He's kind of like, that big slot type of guy. I generally would think that like Adam Troutman is still going to be like the blocking tight end. You can see like last year, about 60% snaps that he was doing, probably still going to be that guy in that offense. And then like if they are in a lot of that 11 or 11 and a half personnel where Evan Ingram can play like the big slot, that may be where you get that. But I don't know if you're necessarily going to get like full blown Evan Ingram season. That's why I would generally say like I don't know how much I would want to be chasing that guy attached to an offense where like I generally think he's limited, and I could probably find that production like other places in the draft. If I don't get like some magical outlier season. And it's not that I don't think that he doesn't have that range of outcomes. You go back to 2023 where he did that. I just don't know if he's going to do that in this offense, especially when we talk about like RJ Harvey may get some of the receiving work there. So let's see. And I haven't heard anything about like the number 2 wide receiver for the Broncos at this point. Moving on to the Browns. So one of the things I did hear is that the Browns, that Dillon Gabriel is actually like ahead of where they thought he was going to be. So like I definitely see that like I can see that Dillon Gabriel will eventually take the starting quarterback for the job for the Browns this year. So besides that, the Judkins like legal situation, Ford is inappropriately valued because I was hearing that I guess the suspension will be 6 games when that eventually occurs with Judkins. So like you can look at Jerome Ford being inappropriately valued at like 118. So you can theoretically think about him being like Chuba Hubbard last year. Receiving upside, probably not going to get the goal line work. The other guy is Dylan Sampson, which they are giving run there. He's a converted wide receiver. I don't think he's going to take over the goal line work in that offense. So that would be something to look at. But like he is getting some run there. Not necessarily guys that I would be targeting outside of like your 16-man vampire leagues or anything. But at least with Jerome Ford, you can track getting that flyer as a running back 2 to start the season for a few weeks until you can figure out some of the other positions. We'll talk about some of those other running backs that are out there. Let's see. One of the other things, like still tracking that Cedric Tillman is going to be undervalued at his price. And I think I have him here like 57 overall, 138. So kind of pick your poison. I probably would generally go after your Josh Palmers here than your Cedric Tillman, because the quarterback situation is probably slightly better overall. All right. Had to clear my throat real quick. Let's see. Moving on. Let me bring up, let's see, the Browns. So this is another one, a 3rd round draft pick, Harold Fannin from Bowling Green. I guess he's getting a lot of camp hype. So this would be another one that I could definitely see being in a lot of 2 tight ends. Not necessarily thinking that like Fannin's going to be fantasy relevant, but this is just a trend going on across the league where I could definitely see that we're going to get a lot of that. So like Njoku is one of the better actual blocking tight ends and like athletically gifted tight ends that are out there. And then they're bringing in another guy, 3rd round draft pick. Like 3rd round draft pick, they're probably going to be using this guy. And this guy is actually doing the stuff that is making his name come up on Twitter and whatnot. So that's just more interesting stuff to me. If you're under a rock, it does look like Chris Godwin, something's going on. Like I highly doubt he's going to be ready for week 1. If he is ready for week 1, I don't think he's going to be healthy. This just puts more emphasis on Egbuka, being the guy that I will be like targeting in all my leagues at this point. Like, once guys get opportunities, if they are good, they tend to not give them back. And that's how I would generally look at that. When we talk about like guys like Matthew Golden versus like Egbuka, I would probably take Egbuka at this point, like 112 on ESPN. And then on your fantasy pros, I think you also have like misappropriation of value. There's Golden 110. I wonder, is Egbuka higher? There's Ricky Pearsall 102. I'd take Tucker Kraft over Matthew Golden. I'd take that. I mean, the Tucker Kraft being able to put up the same statistical season, but as a tight end in the same range. There's no way he's this low. I gotta go up here. So anyway, like wherever Egbuka is going, I think that's there's no news saying that Chris Godwin is going to be ready on time to change my mind on potentially getting that flop. 121, he's actually lower on Fantasy Pros. That's a little interesting to me. Let's see. And then the other one that I have seen some stuff about, another team that could be running a lot of 2 tight ends, Devin Cole. He's a 7th round draft pick. This is another one of those guys that's basically like a big wide receiver. I guess he's doing some stuff in camp. So like, do with that with what you will. The main thing with like Egbuka is like he would have to jump the line on Jalen McMillan, which I think he's talent wise, I think he could have done. But if it's Godwin and then Mike Evans ahead of him, as I brain fart real quick, if these he has to jump the line on those 2 guys to really be fantasy relevant. So with Godwin out of the way, it makes it really easy for him to jump the line on McMillan and then be on the field in those 2 wide receiver sets, even if they're going to be running a lot of 2 tight ends to start or at the beginning of the season with Devin Cole having that good uptick overall in camp. Let's see. Moving on to the Chiefs, I would generally say that like the Chiefs, I don't have anything to say about the Cardinals. I do have stuff to say about the Chargers, so I will go back and find them. Let's see. So I already talked a little bit about Hampton, and I will be targeting him in my auction league as long as he continues to be inappropriately valued. Like 43 overall on ESPN, and then over on your Fantasy Pros, I think he's a little bit better. Let's see. 43 overall. So like the same value. Probably is an RB2 at this point. Another one of those guys, like you can trust the talent that once the guy is given the opportunity, he's not going to give it up. And again, one of the things that I have heard on the Twitters is that like the athleticism, the speed is on display for Hampton versus Najee, who we know is not the most athletic dynamo on the field. So as long as the eye becomes an issue, and we'll talk about this with some of the teams that are out there, teams in camp want to see things. And they will see them as long as they are waiting to see what they want to see. And in this case, like the Najee eye injury, it's one of those things where they're just like, nah, bro, take care of yourself. Because we really want to give this run to the guy that we want to see on the field in Hampton. So like I could definitely see that the problem that we had with Hampton was that he was going to be waiting for his opportunity behind Najee because Najee is not athletically gifted, even if Najee is good at football. In this case, now we can just talk about the fact that if Hampton is good at football and now he's given the opportunity, he's not going to give it up. And that would be the one caveat that I had in the season is that, well, how many weeks am I going to wait for the flop to happen? Well, now it doesn't even look like the flop's going to happen. So now the big question is how much of the receiving work is he going to get to push him from an RB2 to an RB1? And as long as he's going at a value 43 overall, where that's not even built into him. Like I could see that and again in snob leagues, Hampton is going in the 2nd round because they're already baking in that he is an RB2 with upside. So like as long as that continues to be a trend, I will continue to target him where I can in my auction league, where I can just go spend up to a value that's higher than he's worth. So in my auction league, I could definitely, if he's got a $18 value, I could definitely see that I would go up to like $35 and still be able to have upside built into him versus the cost that I put in. If that makes sense. The other news with the Chargers, and I have been seeing 5th round draft pick Keandre Lambert Smith. He's a 4.37 guy. Didn't know anything about him. He's making plays in camp. They do have a theoretical number 2 that we could be looking at, or even like a number 3, even though they may not be that guy in camp. So Quentin Johnson, he's someone else's problem as far as Jim Harbaugh. Harbaugh didn't go out and get him. Trey Harris may be that guy because of the second round draft pick. But at this point, like, we can't talk about like just the overall ability. A guy like Jim Harbaugh will play better guys than draft capital. So like, yeah, if his name keeps coming up, and it may not be a guy that I'm necessarily targeting in my draft, but it's a guy that like I will know ahead of time either next year or during waiver season that like, oh yeah, that's the guy that's lighting up camp, and now he's got his opportunity, he can take it. And then more teams that are likely going to be running your 2 tight ends. So like Will Disley is a blocking tight end they brought in last year. He was the starter. Tyler Conklin they brought in from the Jets. I do like Tyler Conklin as a football player, but in this case, Oronde Gadsden, he is a 5th round draft pick, 4.59 guy. He is a receiving tight end, but, and this is where the best part comes in, is all the good athletic stuff that they drafted a guy like him to do. They are also talking about the fact that he is a willing blocker. And if he is that F position move tight end, he's not going to be digging guys out. He can be 236. And as long as they're like, hey, you will be willing, we can run our base 2 tight end sets and we can use you as that de facto number 3 slot guy and that wing back at the same time. And then Bob's your uncle. So like, probably not something that will win you leagues this year, but it's one of those things that like, oh yeah, I heard that name already. It's just not coming out of nowhere. So stuff like that does tend to interest me. So now we can talk about the Chiefs, and I would generally say entirely, outside of Travis Kelce, I would probably be backing away from the entirety of what's going on. So camp stuff, Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt and Elijah Mitchell are running with the ones. 7th round draft pick Rashad Smith is being used out there too. They will run gadget gimmicky stuff in the red zone, which will lower the overall ceiling of whoever is getting out there. If we're getting someone running back by committee, on top of that, like, yeah, and then you can't even really play cheapest available at that point. Like, yeah, Pacheco may have value where he's going like 88 overall or something like that. But like trying to guess right that he's like some type of like RB2 or like low end RB1 becomes like tougher and tougher to say like that's worth spending the value on at that point. And then we are expecting some type of suspension from Rashee Rice. You get the equal and opposite reaction of Xavier Worthy's stock going up. At that point, like if he's going, and I think he's going like 50 overall at this point, I can go back to here because I think I have him marked up someplace. If he's going like 50 overall right there, like 51 overall, Xavier Worthy, you know who I'm probably going to go after if Rashee Rice does get a suspension? It's going to be Travis Kelce at 83 overall. That would be the way, because tight ends can't break my heart. That's how I would look at that when it comes to those things. And again, this is one of those offenses that was not good last year and that we're going to be spending on them, expecting them to be good, which normally I would tend not to do. I would like to spend on bad offenses that I can project to be good versus price. All right, Colts. So whatever is going on with the quarterback situation for the Colts, I hope it's Daniel Jones to start the season, because if it's Daniel Jones, that means that like he cannot be good, and then Anthony Richardson can come in. If they start Anthony Richardson and Anthony Richardson is not good, it probably means that they're done with Anthony Richardson there, and then we might end up seeing some Riley Leonard. So if you want to be spending on your receivers for the Colts, again, it just becomes an issue of price shopping. There's a lot of good prices on them overall. You are looking at, I believe Michael Pittman is going about 100 overall, which is not bad, like 101 overall. He would be the guy. Like Josh Downs is probably going to be like 60% snaps. I did see a lot of stuff that like Adonai Mitchell is struggling in camp. So like that would make me think that like Alec Pierce is going to still be the X out there. And again, like you're trying to guess on the quarterback situation. And then Ty Warren, again, if we're expecting that we're not going to get unicorn type of tight ends, we can speculate that like Tyler Warren can get to being fantasy relevant by having like lower production or lower statistical season, like 800-900 yards, and then it's touchdown dependent, and that's probably going to be based off the offense. The other thing that I'm kind of shying away from Jonathan Taylor, because Giddens, who's like a 4th round draft pick, I believe he's a 4th round draft pick, he is, I guess he's tearing up camp. They did use like Goodson and some of the other guys out there. Let's see, Giddens, 5th-round draft pick. So I guess Giddens is doing well in camp, and then they also brought in Khalil Herbert as insurance against your Jonathan Taylor. So yeah, do with that what you will. I think Jonathan Taylor, outside of being like high volume rushing and a lot of rushing touchdowns, is going to be hard to return. So he probably is going to be a little bit more of a punt. And noticing that they do have a little bit more depth at running back this year kind of worries me. Also, when it comes down to that, let's see, Redskins, a little bit of stuff to talk about with them. So running back situation. So I have heard that like Ja'Cory Crosby Merritt, he's doing well in camp, and then that makes me go look up the Austin Eckler contract situation. Yeah, they can get out from underneath Austin Eckler this year. And again, the other thing is to talk about this with your Terry McLaurin. It becomes price shopping. We can talk about like Debo potentially getting some run at the running back position, on top of the fact that like there may be some more vacated opportunities there. And then again, it says price shopping. What am I expecting to get out of Debo if at the price that he would be going at? And it's pretty simple, because I think he's going lower in your drafts. Where's he at? Like 98 overall. Like if I get a wide receiver 2 out of that, because I'm going to get some rushing touchdowns, like now we can predict like, hey, maybe there's going to be some rushing touchdowns available in there. Like Brian Robinson, the other thing that makes this Ja'Cory Crosby Merritt news interesting is that like it probably does cut into any ability for like Brian Robinson to have upside. So yeah, that all that stuff makes me go like, yeah, I outside of like a hard punt at that position, because I'm really struggling at my running back depth, I'm probably not going to be going after your Brian Robinson at the prices that he's going, and you're like at 91 overall. So again, like more appropriately valued because of the lack of upside, even though you might get like a 12-point a game running back because he's good at football. And then trying to pair that, where's he going? 91 overall, trying to like pair that with like the other guys that I would be going up with in that range, like Ricky Pearsall would be the guy that like if Brian Robinson fell to me at cost, because I don't know how many people are going to go up on a Brian Robinson, it would be Ricky Pearsall in that range. So like the little camp news that makes me go, yeah, those guys in that range, Ricky Pearsall is a pretty safe bet for me to be spending like a pick in the 80s on. Let's see. Moving over to the Cowboys. So this was another one like a good offense attached to a bad defense is something that I would want to be spending on. So I do like George Pickens. At his cost. Let's see, where's he at? Like 60 overall, to be some type of like T. Higgins or Jalen Waddle a couple years back when he finished top 12 wide receiver, Deontay Smith. I can see him being at that cost. So that would be another reason why, like, if he's going wide receiver 31 overall, I would rather go up on George Pickens slightly into like say the 50s than to be spending on your Tyreek Hill at 26 overall to Courtland Sutton 54. I would rather go up on George Pickens with that upside than pick up some of those guys later in the draft. So like I could look at that and take advantage of that. From the let's see, running back situation, the Cowboys are a mess, so I probably won't be taking any part of that. So I will start off talking about the running back situation for the Cowboys by saying that like wide receiver Kevontae Turpin is getting run as a running back with them, and then Jadon Blue got like work with the ones today. Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders were working with the ones to start camp. And I did see that like Deuce Vaughn has even been getting some run with the camp at that point. So, and then did see a tweet where one of the coaches was talking about liking Phil Maffa, the 7th-round draft pick. So yeah, if there's a guy that I would be going after at this point when it comes to cost, it's probably like waiting on Phil Maffa after getting some of the cuts that we're likely to get when it comes to the running back situation for the Cowboys. Let's see. And then finally, if you didn't hear that the Cowboys signed Jake Ferguson to a 4-year, $13 million year deal, and that explains a lot of stuff. So like, does look like Luke Schoonmaker is going to be a bust at that 2nd-round draft pick that they put into him a couple years ago. Otherwise, we're going to get a lot of 2 tight end sets for the Cowboys this year, and that kind of would explain some of the other, like they don't really have a wide receiver 3 that I think it would be better than maybe going like a lot of like 2 tight ends. So, but anyway. Moving on to the Dolphins. Not a lot of news when it comes to the Dolphins. trying to figure out what's going to go on with their with Waller or their wide receiver 3. But I was thinking that Ollie Gordon was going to win the running back 2 job. In this case, like Alexander Madison that I left for dead, I guess he is having a really good camp. So like definitely could end up being the short yardage guy for the Dolphins. So there you go on that one. When you're wrong, you're wrong. Let's see. Eagles. The only real news on the Eagles at this point is that I don't think AJ Dillon will ever be anything more than like the pass blocking guy for the Eagles. So if I still would be tracking in some of your like deeper leagues that Will Shipley is a lottery ticket handcuff. Based off all that, let's see. Falcons. So there's a little bit to talk about with the Falcons because of the Darnell Mooney shoulder injury. So guys that are going to enter the season injured, and remember, like if he's injured now, he's probably going to be injured the entirety of the season. Vacated targets tend to go to first to running back, so we can't talk about this injury slightly raising the ceiling of Bijan towards a legendary outcome season. The other thing that we could talk about with this is it opens the door for dumpster diving on Kyle Pitts. That's how I would see all that stuff. Let's see. Moving on to the Giants. I did see a podcast where they were talking about the Cam Skattebo, Tyrone Tracy situation, and it pretty much like closed the door on Cam Skattebo, at least from a draftability standpoint. I'm not saying he won't win the job later on, but he is working as the personal protector on the punt team. And if they got a significant special teams role for him, is because they probably don't have a significant week to week role for him in the offense. So not to say that we won't get Cam Skattebo, it just probably isn't going to be worth drafting him and holding on to him. It does look like they are going to give Tyrone Tracy the same opportunity that he had at the end of the last season. Based off that news, that's how I would track that now. So you're looking at like 60-70% snaps if he can work on that pass blocking and the fumble stuff. So that would still track with Devin Tracy being the trustworthy guy attached to him in like a 60-40, 70-30 split. And at that point, even if Cam Skattebo gets some run, like 5, 10, 20%, he's not going to be draftable. And if you did draft him at that point, you're going to have to hold on to him for a significant portion of the season. We're talking about like 3-4 weeks until you can start seeing that usage flop. So that one thing about the personal protector like really was like, okay, yeah, that ends that conversation at this point in camp. Let's see. Moving on to the Jags. Running back situation, I have no idea. Let's see. Tootin with a hamstring. I have seen that like Etienne is going to be the receiving back. Bigsby's having a good camp, and Tootin's having a good camp. And at that point, like your best bet would be to go after the cheapest available. And if it's going to be Tootin, pick him up off the waiver wire in your managed leagues. Or again, like Cam Skattebo, you're drafting him to hold on to him for a significant period of time. And then the other thing that I would bring up is that I did dumpster dive a little bit on Parker Washington. He is, I guess, having a good camp overall, trying to guess on what the situation is going to be with Travis Hunter, who is going back and forth between offense and defense almost daily. I don't know how that's going to work from a fantasy perspective overall. And then they did spend $10 million for De'Ami Brown to come in. So, yeah, I don't know. And I haven't really heard anything on Brenton Strange other than like he is the clear tight end one at camp. As you can see, I didn't even see that before I went live. Let's see. Moving on to the Jets. If you're Twitter watching, you want to put your money on someone right now, it's like Braylon Allen. He is a camp hype guy to cut into Breece Hall, versus cost. I did see that. And then the other thing with the Jets is I thought that what's his face, that Jeremy Ruckert was going to win the starting tight end job because he is the vet who can run block. In this case, I've already seen that like it does look like Mason Taylor has already jumped in the second round draft pick, and there is a vacated number 2 there. So again, this would be another reason why I would just be punting the tight end position and seeing what I can get earlier in the season. So if you're in deep enough leagues that you have to stash the number 2 attached to what appears to be a run heavy offense, you can do that. When it comes to the Lions, I should have probably brought up the actual like red zone rep. That Jameson Williams like route running is ridiculous. In this case, like did see the argument about like fading your sun god and then picking up Jameson Williams with that some type of efficiency flop between the two players. Because again, if JMO is going to get up to like 120 targets this year, those targets will likely come out of the pocket of the Sun God, and that production will go to him. And then it just becomes an issue of price shopping, and you're going to have to pay for Jameson Williams. And again, like George Pickens in that offense is probably the number 2 versus Jameson Williams. He's going to have to take that significant step forward, eat into the Sun God, and then not have Laporta take a step forward and Gibbs not take a step forward. It's a good play. I'm not going to say it's not, but it's probably Pickens. I would probably go up on versus cost, and Jameson Williams I would probably take when he falls to me at that position. And if you're wondering about like Jameson Williams, where he's going in your drafts, I think this is all running backs. On Fantasy Pros, where's he at? He's got to be up higher. There's Pickens at 71, which is actually lower. So I'm a little surprised about it. I'm also surprised that he's going lower than Tet. Jameson Williams 58 overall. So yeah, you're gonna have probably like if you really like Jameson Williams, you're probably gonna have to spend on him. But I could definitely see him being on a short list of guys I would take at cost if he falls to me, with no one else in that area. So where's he gonna be at? Like someplace here. Jameson Williams. Who would I go up on? Like Tet, maybe. Those two guys. It's Hawkinson I might go up on versus him. Henderson probably would not necessarily be in that range where I have to go up on him. Let's see. Moving on to the Packers. So the wide receiver room is still a mess from what I can kind of figure out from the Packers. It does look like Matthew Golden is having a good camp so far. They did move Bo Melton to cornerback. So that's at least one guy that like we don't have to worry about really getting into the snap shares on. And you can see like he just eats into it a little bit. One less guy to go after. And then if Jaden Reed continues to operate in that like 60% snaps range, it becomes an issue of price with Golden, even though like it does sound like he's having a good camp. I would rather have Stephon Diggs, but I probably have to go up on Stephon Diggs versus where he's going. I would also rather have Ibuka versus like the cost of like the Matthew Gordon. I believe on Fantasy Pros he is actually cheaper. 110 if you're tracking that stuff. So again, like know your league. Normally the guys in your league are going to go, they're going to go off the rankings of your league versus like trying to speculate versus all league. Know how competitive your league is and how much you have to go up on guys. If you like that, I would still rather go up on your Tucker Kraft than your Matthew Goldens in that one, because again, the idea that like even if Matthew Golden has like a 900-yard season, if Tucker Kraft has that 900-yard season, I would rather have Tucker Kraft, and there is still an opportunity for number 1 in that offense. It's easier for the tight end to do that statistically than it is for a wide receiver. Let's see. Panthers, there's some news, especially the tight end position here, is that Tommy Tremble that they re-signed, he, again, 3 to 4 weeks, and then Jatavion Sanders that really couldn't do the job when he was given the opportunity. I would probably be putting my money right now that you're going to get 5th round draft pick out of Notre Dame, Mitchell Evans. He is one of the better Y position tight ends that were out there, so I could see that occurring. You got to be in deep enough leagues to be chasing that, but tracking that ahead of time. And again, Tet continues to be slightly undervalued. Like, again, I don't necessarily like him as a prospect, but I can respect the fact that it is going to be a bad defense, and you see like worse defense last year. So they may end up throwing a lot, and if you get somewhat consistent of your Bryce Young step forward, that you can necessarily get that with the draft capital. So it just becomes an issue of cost. 65 overall, and then on your Fantasy Pros, where's he going at? 65. Like again, probably one of those guys. Like I don't know how much I would go up on him, but it would be a guy that I would be very interested. Chasing rookie wide receivers is a good way to get upside. So like Internet Man does not need to tell you that once again. Let's see. And Pat's situation, I am getting a little bit more bearish on Travion Henderson, especially in that receiving role, because then all the rushing work ends up being gravy, and then it just becomes an issue of price shopping versus where he's going in most of your drafts. I think you have him over here. So 71 overall. And then it's right in the same range as like RJ Harvey. So yeah, I am like again why I can fade other positions, other places, and get that type of production from guys that I am drafting to be RB2s with limited upside. Uh, but again, like he would be a guy that I could definitely see if there's injuries would increase his overall value. We go back to the running back situation. So when I build some of these guys, especially in my auction league, 61 overall, I can know ahead of time that these are guys at affordable prices that I can go after later on in the draft to kind of Frankenstein that like RB2 spot after going after like elite running back early or replacement level guys that I can afford if I do go like a two tight or two running back build. Let's see. And then the wide receiver room for the Pats. Right now, it does look like it's going to be Diggs. Kyle Williams is actually playing the X, like the ISO guy, and then Pop Douglas is having a good draft. I don't know if you're necessarily going to get enough volume to go after like a guy like Pop Douglas. I think is going to be like capped as like a wide receiver 3. Kyle Williams maybe because of the old manness of Diggs, might be able to talk about like if he's on the field as the X, um, you might be able to get him up there to wide receiver 2 land. I still would generally like Diggs at his cost at 77, a guy that like is looking like you might have to go up on him slightly to go get him. So like you're looking at like the possibility of having to make your mind up between like Stephon Diggs, um, going up on him and Tet at cost, something along those lines, and then in your ESPN league, so I can visualize this. There's Stephon Diggs. I would have to like it. You're looking at like Diggs versus like maybe like Harvey or Henderson at cost, or going up on Diggs. So versus if you get lucky in your draft position, you might be able to like get them on the flop or something like that. All right, and then I have seen some things that Drake May is very inconsistent, which is not overwhelmingly surprising. Raiders, a lot of stuff with the Raiders right now, their rooms. So it does look like the starting wide receivers are Jacoby Myers, second round draft pick Jack Beck, who I do think is capped out as a wide receiver 2. But he is going outside of that like 153. So if you're in deep enough leagues, you can be stashing him as a wide receiver 2 later in your draft. And then the other guy, I thought it was going to be Trey Tucker. But in 11 personnel right now, it does look like it's going to be, where's he at? Fourth round draft pick, Deontay Thornton, 6'5", 205, 4.340. That's a little interesting, not from a fantasy perspective, about how he's going to open up the offense for everybody else. So if he can hold on to that job, yeah, that helps out your possibility like Brock Bowers or your Jack Beck, being able to return on his investment. The problem is I still think like Jacoby Myers is going to be the number 2 in that offense behind Brock Bowers, and there's a possibility that Jack Beck can just be better than him when it comes down to it. So I don't really care about Jacoby Myers. Rams, there's more stuff to talk about with them. Oh yeah, going back to the Raiders, I do want to talk about. I am tracking on whether or not the Raiders are going to end up playing a lot of 2 tight end sets. I am not hearing that they are at this point. That was one of the things based off of the last staff that was running Michael Mayer in this like 70-80% role. That's the big reason about like with Thornton. It does look like they're going to be in a lot of 11 personnel. So that's something that I was curious about. Rams. So if you are targeting your Rams players this year, first and foremost, whatever's going on with Matt Stafford, and it says that he'll be ready week 1. Again, if you're drafting a guy that's going to be injured, expect that there's going to be injury problems during the season. You are drafting Rams that are going to eventually probably be attached to Jimmy Garoppolo this year. Just remember that. If you're looking at your Puka shares or your Devontae Adams shares, and I don't really have a lot to say about the running back situation. I don't know how you're going to get like league winner out of Hunter at this point. Like that's just the long and short of that answer. I did see that he was getting runs, I think, with the ones today. So like that, it doesn't mean that he's not going to be without value. I just don't know how he necessarily wins me a league versus has me come in third place. Let's see. Ravens, there is some stuff with them. So I did see that like Keaton Mitchell is having a hard time getting opportunities in camp. So this would probably move Justice Hill up into that like priority handcuff range at this point. Like something that we were tracking on last year. It's just the little news that if Mitchell's having a hard time getting any opportunities, then Hill's role in the offense is probably pretty safe at this point. And Isaiah Likely He is injured right now. Could be ready for week 1. That would probably raise the value of Mark Andrews if you're going to be chasing your Mark Andrews to absorb at least initially the three-headed monster that was the Ravens tight end room last year. I can see that you're going to get an uptick in Mark Andrews to start your season off. If you want to be chasing him, I wouldn't be chasing him, but you do you. Saints, this is one of the ones that I will say pretty confidently we can say is going to be a bad offense. So it does not look like Tyler Show, the second-round draft pick, is necessarily tearing camp up. And I was seeing that we're still getting like Spencer Rattler and Jake Haener running with the ones. So like, projecting forward that offense based off of how Rattler and Haener functioned last year is probably not great. That means like the running back room's already ugly. Outside of like chasing the receiving upside of Alvin Kamara attached to a bad offense, and that means like Chris Olave may not be inappropriately valued. You're probably going to get, if he stays healthy, you're probably going to get a return on his investment. But again, that offense with that quarterback situation means that like expecting that you're going to get much over wide receiver 3 regardless. I think he is going at in the 70s over here. Let's see. He's going 75 on ESPN, and it's not a guy that I would go up on. Obviously, if I'm sitting in a league where like Stephon Diggs is there with Chris Olave, I'd be going Stephon Diggs. And even at that point, like you're looking at 75 overall. So other guys that would be like Tony Pollard, RB2. That's really easy. If I was going to go up on a guy at that point in the draft, if Henderson or Harvey fell to me versus Olave, that makes it really easy. Versus how bad the quarterback situation does appear it's going to be. If Tyler Show was tearing camp up, we could expect that maybe there's a possibility that we're going to get one of those offenses we thought were going to be bad. We're going to be good. At this point, like I don't see a way that we can tell that story when it comes down to that. So that means all other guys like Rashid Shaheed and Brandon Cooks, like I don't care about. Just generally with this one of the offenses I would stay away from. Seattle do have a lot of stuff on Seattle. Does maybe look like we might get a 50-50 split with Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker would be one of the guys that I would talk about the short list of having legendary outcome seasons because of the receiving work that he had when he was healthy last year. But again, does the camp stuff saying like maybe 50-50 split? Who knows? The other thing I'm tracking on is who's going to be the wide receiver 3 and the big X with Cooper Kupp coming over. If it's Jake Bobo, he's a dirty work wide receiver versus MVS, who's just like bad at football. Sacrificial X, if you want to put it. So this is yet another thing that makes me think that like if Bobo was the number 1, which I haven't heard anything about that guy being, this is another thing that like yes, there is a possibility we're going to get like Elijah Arroyo running as the de facto number 3 in the offense at that point. So now we can start talking about that because I would expect AJ Barner to lead the Seahawks in snaps this year just based off of the blocking opportunity. So at that point, like, yeah, now we can maybe talk in deep enough leagues that you can take a flyer on Arroyo or knife fight for him week 1. It is leaning in that direction. If you're wondering about that, Steelers. So I would probably be leaning against going after any of the Steelers running backs at this point, and it's because it does look like Kenneth Gainwell may end up being the receiving back there. So that's going to cap your upside of what Jaylen Warren could be. And Caleb Johnson is still getting reps with the ones. So they're right there. So he is still in the mix. And that means like we are tracking as running back by committee. Wide receiver news in this case, like does look like DK is getting like half the targets from Aaron Rodgers. So slow offense attached to a good defense, but DK may have like a 50% target share for the Steelers if you want to be going after that. The other news that's a little interesting to me is that Roman Wilson is running as the number 2. And this is one of those things that like sometimes in camp, teams want to see what they want to see. And they want to see if Roman Wilson is going to be on the field when there are in 2 wide receivers, like that's 2 running backs or 2 tight ends. That's why they're going to have him out there. Now, he is a dirty work guy that will block. That's from the Michigan Jim Harbaugh offense. So it doesn't necessarily mean that he is fantasy relevant, but I could definitely see why they're looking at a guy that was projected as a slot-only guy playing on the outside. That makes sense to me versus being opposite of DK. And in this case, because the other guy that would end up winning the job would be like Bobby Trees himself. Not going to be fantasy relevant, but like it makes sense to me. And this would be another thing with your Jonnu Smith trade. Jonnu Smith, another team that looks like they're going to be running a lot of 2 tight ends. Let's see. Texans. So if you haven't heard right now, it does look like Joe Mixon may not actually play this year. So take that with a grain of salt when I say that. And then you're going to be chasing either like 4th round Woody Marks out of USC, who I do like, or old man Nick Chubb. And remember, like, Nick Chubb is good at football, just like Frank Gore played till he's like 37 years old. So some of the diminishing physical ability can be masked by just being good at football. And this is an offense that does not project to be good, does not project to have a good offensive line. But you're going to be chasing a certain amount of like rushing touchdowns, and then it just becomes an issue of price. If you're trying to get the full upside with, going back to this one, if you're trying to get the full upside of like 214 versus 221 on ESPN with these guys, like 13th round draft pick, again, this will be another one like your Jerome Fords that you can be stashing at the end of your draft by being heavy with some of these other running backs that you're not necessarily going to be sure about week 1, like your Hendersons or your Harveys, and going after like a Nick Chubb and going like, I think I can get like a 1 or 2 week rental with a 13th round draft pick. You can build a team that way. It's not a bad idea based off the Joe Mixon news. I don't have a lot else on the receivers there, I don't think. Titans. This is a good point that has been brought up about like how I don't necessarily like Cam Ward as a prospect. That doesn't mean anything from fantasy perspective. It all has to do with price. And right now, the closest thing to competition for Calvin Ridley is going to be old man Tyler Lockett and Chig. So that would be the idea behind looking at the price of Calvin Ridley and generally fading the wide receiver 2 position from a ranking standpoint. And that's why I have this pulled up. Is like Calvin Ridley comes up like 55 overall, and I can punt those other guys and then go after theoretically the number 1 attached to a bad defense at that point. So I like that a lot more because there isn't going to be a lot of opportunity or competition for opportunity, and all Cam Ward needs to be at that point is okay. He doesn't have to be great. He has to just be okay attached to that offense, and then Calvin Ridley is going to return on his investment. And I'll bring up this one. Going back to your wide receiver room, so you get an idea where he's going at. So this would be a good. Like I'm not thrilled about chasing Cam Ward's number 1, but I also can understand like the thought process behind it, and it would be something that I would be looking at. It's up here, versus where he's going like 76 overall. So if you're in a league where Calvin Ridley is projected to go 76 overall, yeah, that would be something that you could look at going like a round higher at to potentially get. I don't know if I can definitely see like top 12 wide receiver. I think he's going to be closer to maybe like a wide receiver 2 going outside of that range. Let's see. And then that would also mean that Tyler Lockett would be misappropriately valued regardless if you think that Cam Ward has some type of chance to be better than it does appear that like a lot of people are not particularly interested in that offense, and that's generally easy to go pick those guys. The number 2 there, Lockett's going to be good at football. And then finally, the Vikings news. So this injury to Justin Jefferson, remember, this is fringe taking him off my board at the price that I would have to pay for him because he's likely not going to enter the season healthy at all. It doesn't matter. This is something that could end up lingering throughout the season. So this is stuff that I would be paying attention to. Did get an MRI, did show a hamstring strain. So it doesn't say that like, zero worry is coach speak for I don't know. So now you can start talking about, especially with the injury to Jefferson and the potential suspension of Jordan Addison, the slight uptick to Aaron Jones. Vacated targets tend to go to running backs first, and then second to tight ends. So now we can start talking about like theoretically the possibility that we're going to get some type of TJ Hawkinson like sub legendary season. Probably not going to get to legendary outcome, but we can talk about like definitely going up there and knife fighting with Brock Bowers and Trey McBride. And that would mean at the cost that I would have to go after TJ Hawkinson out there, 60 or where's he at? Like 69 overall, versus some of the other guys that would be in that range, like Tet maybe, all the way up to like probably like George Pickens if George Pickens was available at cost, like because George Pickens may have more points than TJ Hawkinson, but TJ Hawkinson would, I could see moving TJ Hawkinson up to that short list and putting him in that tier with Kittle, McBride, and Powers. So anyway, that's about all I got for like camp rumors and speculation and stuff like that. And when I get enough notes, I'll hopefully put something else out.